Can I ask both leaders, are you troubled by the expansion of the conflict, and do you have any comment most particularly on the recent actions of the US Navy, particularly given Prime Minister Carney your call recently for a rapid de-escalation in the conflict?
Well, we both, of course, the Prime Minister can speak for himself, but I think the world wants to see a de-escalation and wants to see Iran cease to spread the destinations of its attacks. We're seeing Gulf states that have not been involved attacked across the board, including the attacks on civilian and tourist areas as well. But we also want to see the objectives achieved. I want to see the possibility of Iran getting a nuclear weapon removed once and for all. And I also want to see a removal of the ongoing threat that has been there for such a long period of time of Iran endangering peace and security and stability, not just in its own region, but here in Australia.
As the Prime Minister just said, it is a regime that reacts to this by attacking civilians and civilian infrastructure in other countries. And so, while we want to see a broader de-escalation of these hostilities with a broader group of countries than just the direct belligerents involved, we recognize, we stress, that that cannot be achieved unless we're in a position that Iran's ability to acquire a nuclear weapon, develop a nuclear weapon, and to export terrorism is ended. So that process must lead to those outcomes.
Question for Prime Minister Carney. You've said that Canada will not participate in U.S. military action in Iran. So can you definitively say that's going to remain the case, even if hostilities broaden, escalate, or are prolonged?
You've asked a fundamental hypothetical in a conflict that can spread very broadly. Today's events, recent events, point to that. So one can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies when it makes sense. There's a distinction between the offensive actions that were taken and are being taken by the United States and Israel, that were taken by them without consultation with Canada, with other allies, and we're not party to those actions. But we will always defend Canadians. We will always stand by and defend our allies when called upon.
Is the Five Eyes alliance still a viable operating model? Does it need modernising?
I would say that many things, there are many challenges, but there are many things that continue to function very well, and the Five Eyes would be top of that list.
Defense Minister called for a ceasefire in Iran. Do you also call for an immediate ceasefire? Well, we need to see first a de-escalation. We need to see a situation where all the parties in this conflict must recognize the necessity to avoid attacks on citizens, on civilians, and on civil infrastructure. That is not given at this stage. So we need to see a process to achieve that aim. Yes, ceasefire is an objective. Yes, we aspire to it, but that's not the time.
Australia.
Wait, in English, sir?
Before there can be a ceasefire, there needs to be a de-escalation of hostilities. Right now we have a spreading of hostilities. We recognize that. And before we get there, there needs to be the ending of targeting civilian infrastructure. Those are necessary conditions before a ceasefire can exist.
Do you trust Donald Trump, and can Australia trust Donald Trump? And Prime Minister Albanese, when it comes to your campaign on a future made in Australia, how does today's critical minerals deal cooperate and interact with that plan to be Australia first in all cases?
Thank you. Well, certainly, the facts are we're in a position where Canada has a comprehensive free trade agreement with the United States. There's certain protocols under that agreement If temporary tariffs or other tariffs are put in place, those have not been followed. So that agreement effectively has been broken in the short term by U.S. actions. That's the fact that would be acknowledged, I think, by all sides. Maybe slightly more diplomatic terms would be used, but that's the reality.
Your European allies called for de-escalation immediately, didn't they? Why didn't you? Because we are sovereign. We make our own decisions.
Prime Minister, how can you have it both ways? How can you say you initially, I understand your first statement, you said was made in hours, but you also said there was some predictability. You knew this was going to widen. So how can you have it both ways? And in hindsight, should you have called for de-escalation in that first statement?
No. In hindsight, to that point, in my judgment. Secondly, in terms of war, there are likelihoods, there are possibilities. You have to plan for the worst, but there are no certainties in conflict. And so now that the conflict has moved on, now that the conflict is involving a much wider group, but even if, I don't want to say even if, but moving into the Gulf, moving into civilian infrastructure, we're seeing a few things. One, it is not solely the decision of the principal belligerents to move to the de-escalation. Should recognize that the members of the Gulf Cooperation Council are showing tremendous restraint at the moment. They're solely acting in a defensive manner. That's true from a range of others.
Jelajahi cara baru mendapatkan informasi. Download MetroTV Extend sekarang.